The heavy steel tailoring shears drove downward with sickening force, punching through gray worsted wool and pinning the delivery man's sleeve directly to the solid oak cutting table. The suppressed gunshot blew a hole through the ceiling plaster. Instead of Dominic Falcone's skull, Maeve did not scream. The deafening crack of the misfired bullet echoed off the mirrored walls of Bespoke by Bernard. Plastered dust rained down on the imported Italian silks, coating the high-end boutique in a suffocating white haze. Maeve Sullivan kept her hands clamped firmly over the handles of her 10-inch Wiss tailoring shears. Her knuckles were bone white. She had used every ounce of her substantial weight to drive the blades through the assassin's leather jacket, through the fabric of the suit he had ruined, and 3 inches deep into the historic oak cutting table. The man trapped beneath her let out a feral, agonized howl. He twisted violently, his right wrist completely immobilized by the steel, pinning his sleeve and the flesh of his forearm to the wood. His fingers spasmed, dropping the suppressed pistol onto the hardwood floor with a heavy, metallic clatter. Dominic Falcone did not flinch. The boss of the North Side was a man sculpted from violence. Yet he stood perfectly still in front of the 3-way mirror. His bespoke dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. He looked down at the assassin writhing on the table, then slowly shifted his icy, predatory gaze to the plus-size seamstress still leaning heavily over the wood. 10 minutes ago, her boss Bernard had told her she was taking up too much room. Try not to knock over the displays with your hips. Maeve, the frail owner, had hissed as she knelt to measure Dominic's inseam. Mr. Falcone requires precision, not a clumsy girl who can barely fit between the pedestals. Maeve had swallowed the humiliation, as she always did. She was a size 18 woman in a shop that catered to men who demanded perfection and women who starved themselves to achieve it. She knew how to make herself invisible. She knew how to absorb cruelty. But when the front chime had rung and a delivery man had bypassed the register, pulling a weapon from a cardboard shipping tube, Maeve had not shrunk away. She had not tried to make herself smaller. She had lunged. Dominic stepped forward, his leather shoes crunching over the fallen plaster. He moved with a terrifying, fluid grace. He reached out and placed his large, calloused hand over Maeve's trembling fingers, which were still locked around the shears. "Let go," Dominic commanded. His voice was a low, vibrating rumble that commanded absolute obedience. Maeve snatched her hands back, her chest heaving. Her breath came in ragged, jagged gasps. The adrenaline was beginning to recede, leaving behind a cold, paralyzing terror. She stumbled backward, her wide hips bumping into a mannequin, sending it toppling to the floor. Bernard emerged from beneath the cash wrap, his face an ashen mask of pure cowardice. He took one look at the bleeding assassin on his prized oak table and began to hyperventilate. "What have you done?" Bernard shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Maeve. "You stupid, oversized cow. You ruined the table. You brought this into my shop." Dominic did not even look at the shop owner. He kept his eyes locked on Maeve. He saw the way her dark hair clung to her damp forehead, the way her soft, generous curves trembled beneath her cheap navy uniform, the way her dark eyes held a defiant, terrified fire. The assassin yanked his arm, tearing the fabric of his sleeve, trying to pull his flesh free from the embedded shears. Dominic casually stepped on the man's dropped weapon, sliding it out of reach. Then, with a sickeningly calm motion, he reached out and twisted the handle of the shears still buried in the wood. The man screamed again, his knees buckling. "Who sent you?" Dominic asked, his tone as conversational as if he were ordering espresso. The man spat a curse in Italian, his face pale with agony. "Salvalenti says hello from the south side, you dead bastard." Dominic simply nodded. He reached into his trouser pocket, pulled out a sleek black phone, and hit a single speed dial button. "Clean up on Oak Street," Dominic said into the receiver. "Bring the van. We have a talker." He hung up and finally turned his head toward Bernard, who was now weeping over a pile of ruined silk ties. The shop owner scrambled backward, his hands raised in surrender. "Mr. Falcone, I swear on my mother's grave, I knew nothing about this. She is just a temporary hire. I will fire her immediately. I will pay for the damages. Just please, spare me." Dominic walked slowly toward Bernard. The silence in the shop was heavy, broken only by the ragged breathing of the pinned assassin. "You will not fire her," Dominic said softly. He reached down, grabbing Bernard by the lapels of his expensive tweed jacket, and hauled the older man to his feet with effortless strength. "You will close this shop," Dominic continued, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You will never open its doors again. If I see your face in this city after midnight tonight, I will have my men bury you beneath the foundation of your own home. Do you understand me?" Bernard nodded frantically, tears spilling down his wrinkled cheeks. Yes, Mr. Falcone." Dominic dropped him. He turned back to Maeve. She was standing near the shattered front window, hugging her arms tightly around her chest. The harsh afternoon light caught the faint smear of blood on her cheek, where a piece of flying debris had grazed her. She looked utterly out of place, a soft, grounded woman caught in the epicenter of a Mafia war. "Grab your coat," Dominic told her. Maeve blinked, her mind struggling to process the command. "My coat. I need to give my statement to the police. I need to go home to my apartment in Pilsen." "There are no police coming," Dominic said, "and you do not live in Pilsen anymore." Maeve squared her shoulders. The fear was still there, but a stubborn streak of sheer survival instinct pushed through it. She was not a pawn to be moved around a board. "I am not going anywhere with you," she said, her voice shaking but surprisingly loud. "I pinned his arm. I saved your life. We are even. I am walking out that door." Dominic closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He loomed over her, a towering figure of dark authority. He did not touch her, but his presence was a physical wall blocking her exit. "Sal Valenti is a paranoid, ruthless man," Dominic explained, his eyes scanning her face. "His assassin just failed because a seamstress intervened. By tonight, Valenti will have your name. By tomorrow morning, his men will kick down the door of your apartment in Pilsen and torture you until you stop breathing, just to send me a message." Maeve felt the blood drain from her face. Her legs suddenly felt entirely incapable of supporting her weight. "You have 2 choices," Dominic said, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips before meeting her eyes again. "You can walk out that door and test your luck against the South Side crew, or you can get in my car and you will become entirely untouchable." "Untouchable," Maeve repeated, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "How?" Dominic reached out, his thumb gently wiping the speck of blood from her cheek. The touch was shocking, electric, and completely at odds with the violence he had just orchestrated. Because when my men arrive in 60 seconds, I am going to tell them that you are my fiancée. Maeve stared at him, her heart slamming against her ribs like a trapped bird. You are insane. Nobody will believe that. Look at me. She gestured to her body, to the cheap uniform stretching tight over her wide hips, to her lack of makeup, to the absolute absence of high society polish. I am looking at you, Dominic replied quietly. I see exactly who you are. Now get your coat. The heavy screech of tires on the pavement outside shattered the moment. 3 matte black SUVs mounted the curb directly in front of the shattered boutique window. A dozen men in dark suits poured out, their hands hovering near their waistbands, their eyes sweeping the street for threats. The lead man, a tall, broad-shouldered capo named Enzo, burst through the remaining glass of the front door. His weapon was drawn. "Boss!" Enzo shouted, his eyes darting from Dominic to the bleeding assassin on the table. "Are you hit?" Dominic stepped firmly in front of Maeve, shielding her completely from Enzo's view. "I am fine," Dominic stated. "Secure the package on the table. Take him to the warehouse by the river. I want to know exactly how Valenti knew my schedule." Enzo nodded sharply, gesturing for 2 of his men to grab the assassin. He then peered around Dominic's broad shoulder, his eyes narrowing as he took in Maeve's terrified, disheveled form. "And the girl?" Enzo asked, his tone dismissive. "Do we clean her up?" The phrase was a known syndicate euphemism. It meant a shallow grave. Maeve's breath hitched in her throat. Dominic's posture instantly went rigid. The atmosphere in the room turned dangerously cold. "Watch your tone, Enzo," Dominic warned, his voice cracking like a whip. "You will address her with the respect she commands." Enzo blinked, clearly taken aback. "Boss, she is a witness. She is a liability. She is my fiancée," Dominic declared. His voice was loud enough to carry out to the street, ensuring every single man in his crew heard the claim. "And she is coming home with me." The penthouse at 1040 Lakeshore Drive was a fortress disguised as a luxury residence. The private elevator opened directly into a sprawling living space, walled entirely by bulletproof glass, offering a panoramic, dizzying view of Lake Michigan. Maeve stood awkwardly on the plush Persian rug, her cheap, dust-covered shoes a stark contrast to the immaculate surroundings. The sheer scale of the room made her feel simultaneously small and hyper-aware of her own body. She kept her arms crossed tight over her stomach, a defensive posture she had perfected over years of being told she took up too much space. Dominic walked past her, shrugging off his ruined, bespoke jacket and tossing it carelessly over a leather armchair. "Sit down," he ordered gently, pointing to a massive velvet sofa. Maeve did not move. "You told your men we are engaged. You claimed me in front of your entire crew. It was the fastest way to build a wall around you," Dominic replied, walking toward a built-in mahogany wet bar. "In my world, a civilian who helps a boss is a loose end. A fiancé is blood. If Valenti's men touch a hair on your head now, the entire commission will sanction his execution. It is a declaration of total war." He poured a splash of amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses and walked back toward her. He offered her one. She took it, her fingers trembling against the heavy glass. "I am a seamstress," Maeve said, staring down at the amber liquid. I hem trousers and take in waistlines. I do not belong in a mafia war. You belong alive, Dominic corrected softly. He set his glass down on the coffee table and stepped closer to her. He reached out, gently taking her left wrist. Maeve winced slightly, pulling back. The heavy shears had bruised the heel of her hand when she slammed them into the table. Dominic's eyes darkened. He guided her to the sofa, pressing gently on her shoulder until she sat. He knelt in front of her, entirely ruining the crease of his expensive trousers, and began to carefully examine her wrist. 15 years ago, Dominic said, his voice dropping into a hollow, empty cadence. My younger brother, Leo, was gunned down outside a bakery in Little Italy. It was a chaotic hit. A stray bullet caught him in the femoral artery. Maeve held her breath, watching the lethal mafia boss gently rotate her bruised wrist with agonizing care. The street was crowded, Dominic continued, his thumb tracing the blue swelling on her skin. There were 20 people on that sidewalk. Doctors, businessmen, strong men. They all ran. They all stood behind parked cars and watched a 19-year-old boy bleed to death on the concrete. Nobody stepped forward to stop the bleeding. Nobody wanted to get their hands dirty. He looked up, his icy blue eyes locking onto hers. The vulnerability in his gaze was staggering, a raw, gaping wound completely at odds with his ruthless reputation. Today, a man pulled a gun on me, Dominic said, and you, a woman who had just been publicly humiliated by her employer, a woman who owed me absolutely nothing, threw her entire body into the line of fire to stop it. He stood up, looking down at her with a reverence that made Maeve's chest ache. You did not hesitate, he whispered. You acted. That makes you more valuable than anyone else in my inner circle. You will stay here. You will play the part. And I swear on my life, you will be safe. Maeve looked away, her cheeks burning. It is not going to work. Why not? Because of this, she said, gesturing vaguely to her body. Look at the women in your world, Dominic. They are carved from marble. They are size zeros who eat kale and wear designer gowns. I am a size 18. I have stretch marks and wide hips, and I knock over mannequins in fitting rooms. Valenti will see right through the lie. He will know it is a fake arrangement. No one will believe a man like you would choose a woman like me. Dominic's jaw locked. The air in the room suddenly felt dangerously thin. He reached out, his large hands gripping her hips with a firm, possessive pressure. He pulled her flush against his legs, forcing her to look up at him. Do not ever repeat the poison that cowardly Taylor fed you, Dominic growled, his voice a dark, rough rumble. Maeve's breath hitched as the heat of his body radiated through her uniform. You are substantial, Dominic said, his hands smoothing down the curve of her waist, settling firmly on her wide hips. You are real. You take up exactly the space you are meant to inhabit in this world, and I will be damned if I let you shrink yourself for anyone. He stepped back, leaving Maeve completely breathless, her skin buzzing where his hands had been. Tomorrow, Dominic said, returning to his usual cold, authoritative tone. I am bringing a team here. We are going to dress you like the Queen of the North Side. You will not hide your body. You will wear it like armor. The next morning, the penthouse was transformed into a high-end salon. Racks of custom clothing were rolled through the private elevator doors. There were no oversized sweaters or shapeless tents designed to hide her figure. Instead, there were structured blazers, high-waisted wide-leg trousers, and silk wrap dresses cut specifically to honor her curves. Dominic had kept his word. The women he hired treated Maeve with extreme, almost terrifying deference. When she finally emerged from the master bedroom, she was wearing a deep burgundy custom wrap dress that cinched perfectly at her waist and draped beautifully over her thick thighs. Her dark hair was styled in loose, glamorous waves. She walked into the living room, feeling the heavy swish of the expensive fabric against her calves. Dominic was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, talking quietly with Enzo. When he heard her heels click against the hardwood, he turned. The conversation instantly died. Dominic stared at her, his icy eyes slowly tracking the length of her body, absorbing every curve, every line. The raw, unfiltered hunger in his gaze made Maeve's pulse hammer in her throat. He did not look at her like a civilian he was protecting. He looked at her like a man who had finally found something worth keeping. "You look perfect," Dominic murmured, stepping toward her. Enzo cleared his throat, breaking the heavy tension. He held a thick manila folder in his hands, his knuckles white. He did not look at Maeve with respect. He looked at her with deep, calculating suspicion. "Boss, we have a massive problem," Enzo said, his voice tight. Dominic did not take his eyes off Maeve. "I told you to find out how Valenti knew I was at the tailor shop." "I did," Enzo replied, stepping forward and dropping the folder onto the glass coffee table. "We pulled the burner phones from the assassin's apartment. We decrypted the messages." "And?" Dominic demanded, finally turning to face his capo. "Valenti did not know you were at the shop, boss," Enzo said, his voice dropping to a grim, ominous register. "The kill order was not for you." Dominic frowned, a dangerous shadow crossing his face. "What are you talking about?" The man drew his weapon while looking directly at my chest. The silence in the penthouse was absolute, thick enough to suffocate. Dominic did not look at the photograph. He slowly turned his head to look at Maeve. The heavy burgundy dress suddenly felt like a burial shroud. Maeve's heart hammered, but she did not shrink. "Is it true?" Dominic asked. His voice was not angry. It was terrifyingly hollow. "My father was Thomas Sullivan," Maeve said, her voice trembling but clear. "He kept the records for every syndicate in Chicago. The bribes, the murders, the offshore accounts. When he died, he left the master ledger to me. I changed my name. I took a job hemming trousers on Oak Street because I wanted nothing to do with the blood on his hands." Enzo scoffed, his hand resting casually on the grip of his holstered weapon. "She played you, boss. She positioned herself at the tailor shop, knowing you were a client. She used you as a shield against Valenti. I did not know he was coming." Maeve shot back, taking a step forward. "I pinned that assassin to the table to save Dominic's life. And now you are going to cost him his," Enzo replied coldly. The capo drew his weapon, but he did not point it at the penthouse elevator. He pointed it directly at Dominic's chest. The three guards instantly drew their guns, leveling them at Dominic. The betrayal was swift, silent, and entirely absolute. Dominic's expression did not change, but his body went rigid. "Enzo, Valenti made me an offer," Enzo said, his voice devoid of remorse. "The North Side is bleeding money because you refuse to deal drugs. Sal Valenti promised me your seat at the commission. All I have to do is hand over the girl and the ledger. Valenti's men are in the lobby right now. The building is locked down. The police have been paid to look the other way for exactly 1 hour." Maeve felt the floor tilt beneath her. The sanctuary was a cage. You think Valenti will honor a deal with a traitor? Dominic asked softly. I think Valenti wants the ledger more than he wants you, Enzo sneered. He shifted his aim toward Maeve. Where is the book? Give it up, and maybe I let the boss live to watch you leave. Dominic stepped in front of Maeve again, shielding her completely. You will have to shoot through me, Enzo. If you miss my heart, I will tear yours out. Suit yourself, Enzo said, his finger tightening on the trigger. Stop, Maeve shouted. She stepped out from behind Dominic, her wide hips knocking heavily against the glass coffee table. She did not cower. She stood tall, radiating the sheer, undeniable gravity of a woman who held the keys to the underworld. You want the ledger, Enzo, Maeve demanded, her dark eyes flashing with lethal intent. My father was paranoid. He never wrote the ledger down in a single book. He digitized it. He locked it behind a biometric firewall that only I can access. But before he died, he made me memorize the failsafe files. The leverage. Enzo hesitated, his gun wavering slightly. You are lying. Am I? Maeve tilted her head. June 14th, 15 years ago. A bakery in Little Italy. Dominic inhaled sharply. The air in the room froze. A bullet caught Leo Falcone in the femoral artery, Maeve recited, her voice echoing off the glass. But it was not a stray bullet, was it, Enzo? The hit was ordered by the South Side, but a North Side capo was paid to let the shooter through the perimeter. The routing numbers for that offshore account are burned into my memory. Enzo's face drained of all color. His hands began to shake. Shut your mouth, you fat bitch. She is not lying, Dominic whispered, his voice a demonic rasp as the realization shattered him. I triggered the failsafe the moment I saw you drop that folder. Maeve lied flawlessly, holding up her sleek black phone. If I do not enter the biometric cancellation code in exactly 2 minutes, the encrypted files of Leo's assassination go directly to every capo in the North Side. They will know you sold out the boss's brother. You will be hunted like a dog. Enzo panicked. His eyes darted frantically toward the phone in her hand. In that split second of total psychological collapse, Maeve did not wait to be rescued. She threw the heavy crystal whiskey glass directly at Enzo's shocked face. The glass shattered against his jaw. Enzo stumbled backward, his gun firing blindly into the ceiling. Dominic finally moved with terrifying speed. He crossed the rug, sweeping Enzo's legs out from under him and driving his knee into the traitor's chest. Dominic ripped the gun from Enzo's hand and pressed the barrel directly between the capo's eyes. The 3 guards dropped their weapons instantly, dropping to their knees in surrender. Dominic's chest heaved. He looked down at the man who had caused his family 15 years of agonizing grief, then looked up at Maeve. She stood breathing heavily, her hands steady, her dark eyes locked on him. She had just handed him the ghost that had haunted his entire life. Dominic pulled the trigger. The suppressed gunshot was a definitive, brutal end. By midnight, the South Side threat was eradicated. Maeve's anonymous upload of Valenti's bribery logs gave the FBI exactly what they needed. The feds raided Sal Valenti's compound before his men even breached the penthouse lobby. Valenti was federally indicted, his assets frozen, his empire dissolved without a single drop of North Side blood being spilled. The penthouse was quiet again. The bodies were gone. Dominic stood by the open terrace doors, the cool night wind blowing his unbuttoned collar. He held out a small leather pouch. Inside were a pristine new passport, a clean driver's license, and the keys to a secure luxury estate in Geneva. "You are a ghost," Dominic said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "Valenti is ruined. Enzo is gone. The ledger is secure. You honored your father, and you saved my life. The cage is open, Maeve. You can walk out that door, and nobody will ever look for you again." Maeve looked at the pouch. She looked at the sprawling city lights, reflecting in the bulletproof glass. Then she looked at the ruthless, broken man who had looked at her body not with disgust, but with absolute reverence. She stepped forward, her burgundy dress swishing softly, and pushed the pouch back against his solid chest. "I am tired of hiding," Maeve whispered, reaching up to rest her palm against his jaw. "I am exactly where I belong." Dominic exhaled a shuddering breath, wrapping his powerful arms tightly around her thick waist, burying his face in her dark hair, as if she were the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. The next morning, the private elevator chimed. A small, unmarked box sat perfectly centered on the velvet rug. Dominic opened it. Inside rested the heavy steel whisk, tailoring shears, completely cleaned, pinning a single, blood-stained swatch of grey worsted wool to the cardboard base. A handwritten note was securely attached, the script elegant and unhurried. "Sal Valenti sends his regards from Federal Holding. His daughter runs the family now. She says she has excellent taste in tailors." Did the heart-stopping betrayal and Maeve's brilliant, fearless power play leave you breathless? This is only the beginning of their dark, passionate reign over Chicago. If you loved watching this incredible woman claim her worth and her empire, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss another story like this. What do you think Valenti's daughter wants with Maeve? Let us know in the comments below.